Is the Democrat Party racist? Hello, everybody. I'm Jim McCotter. Democrat Senator Jefferson Davis from Mississippi became the president of the Confederacy. He stated, and I quote, "African slavery as it exists in the United States is a moral, a social, and a political blessing," end quote. Southern Democrats passed all the Black Code laws, also called the Jim Crow laws, referring to the 1828 New Orleans riverboat song, "Jump Jim Crow." Anyhow, Virginia Democrat Legislature in 1819 passed their Black Code law, which read, "Be it passed that all meetings of slaves or free negroes or mulattoes mixing with such slaves at any meeting house or school for teaching them reading or writing either in the day or night for any reason shall be deemed an unlawful assembly. And any officer of the law may have permission to enter the house to arrest or send off such slaves and to punish them with up to 20 lashes." End quote. North Carolina Democrat Legislature in 1825 passed their Black Code laws. Quote, "No slave shall be armed with gun, sword, club, or other weapon. The constable is required to give such slave 20 lashes on his or her bare back." End quote. Georgia Democrat Legislature in 1833 passed their Black Code law. Quote, "The free person of color carrying firearms shall receive on his bare back 39 lashes." End quote. Alabama Democrat Legislature 1833 passed their Black Code law. Quote, "No slave shall keep or carry any gun. Every such offender shall receive any number of lashes not exceeding 39 on his bare back." End quote. And Mississippi Democrat Legislature in 1865 passed their Black Code law. Quote, "No freedman, negro, or mulatto shall carry or keep firearms or ammunition." End quote. The Florida Democrat Legislature in 1865 passed their Black Code law, and it said, "It shall not be lawful for any negro, mulatto, or other person of color to own, use, or keep in his possession or under his control any firearms or ammunition of any kind. Any negro so offending shall be sentenced to stand in the pillory for 1 hour or be whipped not exceeding 39 lashes." End quote. The Democrat-controlled United States Congress in 1850 passed the infamous Fugitive Slave Act, pushed through by Democrat Speaker Howard Cobb and Democrat Senate President William King, and signed by Democrat President Millard Fillmore. It, in essence, said if a runaway slave escaped to the North, citizens must capture him and return him to his Southern slave owner. It made a federal crime to interfere with the slave catcher's recovery of runaway slaves. A person could be fined $1,000, equivalent today of $20,000, and imprisoned for 6 months if they failed to report a neighbor suspected of helping slaves. After the Fugitive Slave Act was law in 1854, a slave named Joshua Glover ran away from his master in St. Louis, Missouri, and fled to Racine, Wisconsin. Police from St. Louis traveled across state lines to Racine and bribed an acquaintance of Joshua Glover with $100, equivalent today of $2,000, to open the cabin door. Taking him by surprise, they hit him, clubbed him several times in his face. The blooding Glover was thrown in the back of a wagon, taken to the Milwaukee jail. The kind jailer treated his wounds, and the next day word of Glover's arrest spread through Racine. A crowd of white abolitionists, the largest crowd ever in the town's history, gathered in the square. They grabbed lumber and pickaxes from a nearby construction site and broke through the jail wall, freeing Glover, and quickly put him in a wagon and whisked him out of town. On March 22, 1854, the Sauk County Standard in Baraboo, Wisconsin, they printed the Glover story saying, "After 9 stops on the Underground Railroad, Joshua Glover made it to the Racine Harbor, where he was smuggled into a boat headed across Lake Michigan to Canada." The Glover incident helped galvanize abolitionist sentiment in Wisconsin. This case eventually led the state Supreme Court to defy the federal government by declaring that the Fugitive Slave Act was unconstitutional. A few days after Joshua Glover was freed, the same Wisconsin abolitionist citizens met on March 20, 1854, in a schoolhouse in Ripon, Wisconsin, to form the Anti-Slavery Party. They called it the Republican Party. Contrary to the left's 1619 project, its historical revisionism, slavery was not a black versus white issue. It was a Republican versus Democrat issue. The first National Republican Convention met in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on February 22, 1856, calling Americans to, quote, resist and overthrow the present national administration of Democrat President Franklin Pierce, as it is identified with the progress of the slave power to national supremacy, end quote. The original Republican platform was adopted in June 18, 1856, and it was the first political party in history to have abolition of slavery in its official party platform, the Republican platform. On March 6, 1857, the Supreme Court issued their infamous Dred Scott decision, with the 7 Democrat justices all voting for it, and the only 2 Republican judges all voting against it. Nonetheless, it passed with the majority of Democrats. Pro-slavery Chief Justice Roger Taney, who had been appointed by Democrat President Jackson, wrote that Dred Scott was not a citizen, but property and belonged to his owner, writing in his decision that slaves were, and I quote, so far inferior that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for their own benefit, end quote. Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president. He declared in Springfield of Illinois, June 26, 1857, how differently the respective courses of the Democratic and Republican parties. Republicans inculcate that the Negro is a man, that his bondage is cruelly wrong. Democrats deny his manhood, end quote. On September 22, 1862, Lincoln drafted the Emancipation Proclamation. Quote, the time for the enunciation of the emancipation policy can no longer be delayed. Public sentiment will sustain it. Many of my warmest friends demand it, and I have promised God that I will do it. The Emancipation Proclamation in part read, I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, publicly proclaim that persons held as slaves are and henceforth shall be free, and upon this act I invoked the gracious favor of Almighty God. The renowned black educator Blacker T. Washington wrote in 1901, and I quote, the first knowledge that I got of the fact that we were slaves was early one morning before day, when I was awakened by my mother kneeling over her children and fervently praying that Lincoln and his armies might be successful. And that one day, she and her children might be free. End quote. After the famous Frederick Douglass escaped from slavery, he became an outspoken Republican and the first black advisor to a president, Republican President Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln promoted the Republican Congress in passing the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to abolish slavery, effective December 6, 1865. The 13th Amendment to free the slaves, Republicans voted 100% yes. Democrats voted 85% no. The 14th Amendment to give citizenship to the blacks, Republicans voted 100% yes. Democrats voted 100% no. The 15th Amendment to guarantee the right to vote for the blacks, Republicans voted 100% yes. Democrats voted 100% no. But the most meaningful vote the Republicans ever gave for all blacks was the 360,222 mostly white Republican men who gave up their lives to free all the black slaves. In Charleston, South Carolina, a mass grave was uncovered of 257 Republican Union soldiers who had died in a prison camp. On May 1 of 1865, former slaves organized a parade led by 2,800 singing black children in which they prayed, read Bible verses, sang spirituals, and reburied the soldiers with honor as an act of gratefulness for their ultimate sacrifice, which gave them their freedom. On February 5, 1866, Republican Congressman Thaddeus Stevens introduced legislation to give former slaves 40 acres and a mule. This would have greatly helped the former slaves. All Democrats opposed this order. Moreover, soon as Democrat Andrew Jackson became president, he rescinded the order. The Ku Klux Klan was founded by a Democrat, Nathan Bedford Forrest. As historian Eric Foner, himself a Democrat, notes, and I quote, "In effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party," end quote. Republican President Grant started the Department of Justice with the special intent to end the Ku Klux Klan. In the beginning of the 20th century, President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, shared many views with the Klan. He resegregated many federal agencies and even screened the first movie ever played at the White House, the racist film called The Birth of a Nation, originally entitled The Klansman. Robert Cottrell, professor of law at George Washington University, he stated this, and I quote, "Some of the earliest gun control legislation was aimed directly at black people. The black codes, among other things, prohibited the newly freed black population from having weapons." He went on to say one of the principal reasons for the 14th Amendment was to attack the black codes and also apply the Bill of Rights, specifically the Second Amendment, to the states. Today, black Republican Congressman Burgess Owens, who played in the NFL for the New York Jets and the Oakland Raiders, was quoted in Yahoo Sports in June 19, 2019, and he said, "On the concept of reparations, I used to be a Democrat until I did my history and found the misery that party brought to my race. Let's pay restitution. How about the Democratic Party pay for all the misery brought to my race?" End quote. Restitution or reparations for unrelated later generations is anti-biblical, according to Ezekiel 18, verses 19 through 23 in the Bible. But even at that time, those most worthy would have been the 222,000 families of mostly white Republican men who gave up their lives to free the black slaves. God's prophet Jeremiah said in Jeremiah 15:19 to extract the precious from the worthless. Jesus said in John 10:10, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy." The Democrat Party did this from their beginning, and now their conspirator universities and media are helping them even steal, kill, and destroy more blacks. In the past, white hooded Ku Klux Klan, all Democrats, lynched and killed several thousand blacks. Today, white shirt Democrats all vote in lockstep to literally kill blacks. Federal funded Planned Parenthood centers disproportionately locate next to black communities, having killed over 20 million babies since 1973. Today, white shirt Democrats all vote in lockstep for more perpetual welfare crumbs, destroying blacks, destined to forever be poor and dependent on their present-day Democrat slave masters. You can read more about this in 2 Democrat Slave Plantations in Substack. Dr. Carol Swain, black professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University, she wrote this: "When you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party comes to your mind? The Republicans or the Democrats? Most people would probably say the Democrats, but this answer is incorrect. Since its founding in 1829, the Democrat Party has fought against every major civil rights initiative and has a long history of discrimination. The Democrat Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction, founded the Ku Klux Klan, imposed segregation, perpetuated lynchings, and fought against the civil rights acts of the 1950s and the 1960s. She went on to say, so now, the Democratic Party proposes on the votes and prospers on their votes of the very people it has spent much of its history oppressing. Democrats falsely claim that the Republican Party is the villain, when in reality, it's the failed policies of the Democratic Party that have kept blacks down. Massive government welfare has decimated the black family. Opposition to school choice has kept them trapped in failing schools. Politically correct policing has left black neighborhoods defenseless against violent crime. So, she went on to say, when you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party should come to your mind? In closing, I quote Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the worthless deeds of evil and darkness. Instead, expose them.